it was mentioned that ultimately since by all means perfection in human society is achieved by samsiddhir haritoshanam, by pleasing Hari. And then it was described that since pleasing Hari is the perfection of life in the human society, tasmad ekena manasa, with one pointed attention, one should Bhagavan Sattvatam Patihi Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Heya Pujyascha Nityada. One should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, worship the Supreme Lord Hari. After having said that, in this verse, such constant remembrance and worship and glorifying of the Lord, what is the consequence of that is being described. Yat anudhyasina yuktaha. Anudhya, dhyana means to remember. Anudhyana means always remembering. Anudhyana has two meanings. One is anudhyana, to remember in terms of the instructions given in the scriptures. Not that we make up our own method of remembering. There is a standard method of remembering the Lord, understanding the Lord, glorifying the Lord, and one should follow that standard method. Anudhya. And another meaning of the word anudhyana is to constantly remember. Always remember. So, here an example is given, an interesting metaphor is given. Yat anudhyasina yukta. Asina means a knife or a sword. Yat anudhyasina yuktaha. Yuktaha, possessing, holding, equipped with a sword. Yat anudhyasina yuktaha. What is this sword? The sword of constant remembrance. Anudhyana, sword. So, one who is equipped with this anudhyana, constant remembrance of the Lord, sword, what do? There is something called karma granthi. When the spirit soul comes in contact with the material world and engages in activities, for every action the living entity performs, there is a granthi, a knot. Granthi means a knot, a binding knot. Karma granthi nibandhanam. It's a binding knot. The word bandhanam means binding, nibandhanam. Actually, Prabhupada translated this word. Prabhupada was very careful about translating every word. Very carefully he chose for the translation. So, nibandha, nibandhana, nibandhanam. Nibandha, elsewhere, Prabhupada translates as the obligation to suffer or experience tribulations in life. So, because of your activities, karma, you create a granthi, a knot. Because of that, you have obligated to experience some suffering, some miseries and tribulations in this world. You are obliged. You cannot help escape them. Karma granthi nibandhanam. So, what do these people who who are equipped with the sword do? Chindanti. they sever the knots of karma granthi nibandhanam chindhanti. And such people who do that are kovidaha. Kovida means intelligent people, not foolish people. Kovidas tasya. So this is the result of constantly remembering the Lord. One is able to cut the knots of karma granthi, which obliges us to suffer in this material world. So, and this is what intelligent people have figured out, and this is what they do. So if this is the advantage, if this is the benefit of constantly remembering the Lord, Kona kuryat katharatim, who is that person who is not willing to pay attention to the Lord's messages, Lord's activities, description of the Lord's activities? Because remembrance of these activities enable one to cut the knot of karma granthi, which obliges us to suffer in this world. And all intelligent people remember the Lord and cut the knots of karma granthi. So who is there? Kona kuryat katharatim. Kaha? Na kuryat katharatim na kuryat. Who is there who does not remember, who does not want to pay attention to the Lord's activities and the Lord's message? So this is the verse today. Yat anudhya asina yuktaha karma granthi nibandhanam chindanti. Who does that? Kovida chindanti. Intelligent people do that. Kona kuryat tasya katharatim, tasya his katharatim. Who does not pay attention to the Lord's messages and the Lord's activities? So Prabhupada mentions here, the contact of the spiritual spark with material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from the actions and reactions of fruitive work. Here, this verse is describing that such constant remembrance leads to liberation. Liberation means what? Liberation means that which binds us to the material world and makes us experience the various tribulations of this world. That is why it is called karma granthi nibandhanam. This material world is such that we aspire for so many things, but suddenly the material world obliges us to experience various suffering. Last week I was talking to one gentleman, very well known to our temple for a long time. He was describing about a very rich man, very rich businessman. He's quite an elderly man, very rich. And he had two children, one son and one daughter. They were also very intelligent, and they were gradually taking over the business empire that the father has created. You know, these big businessmen, they always have worries. And what happened to my big business I have developed for so many years? And this man is a very big businessman. So, and he was happy. He was confident that his son and daughter, they are also intelligent, they are taking over the business. The son was 45 years old. All of a sudden, he died. So you can imagine. So much money. He was gradually retiring from business and handing over the business to his son and daughter, and they were also just getting experienced and handling it. And he was hoping that now I can completely retire And suddenly, the son, even before the father, dies. And this is not new. This is not some freak incidents. The world is full of these kind of things happening. That is why the Vedic literatures describe this material world to be a prison house. A prison house. There was a time when from Akshay Patra we were feeding prisoners. Because of that, many other governments also invited us to feed prisoners. So I had the opportunity of visiting a few prisons in the country. In fact, when we met the Chief Minister in Gujarat, and he heard about this, he was very excited, and he said, Swamiji, you must visit our prison. You know, it's a very famous prison, the Sabarmati prison, the prison where Gandhiji was in prison. You must go and see it. So then he made the arrangements, and then we went and saw the Sabarmati prison. But at the time when I went, there was a long queue somewhere at the entrance nearby. There were big gates open. We went and got gates closed behind us. It was dramatic. So another gate opened and then closed, and then we went inside. So somewhere there was a long queue of the prisoners. And there was a board which said 10 minutes or something, phone call. The prisoners are allowed to make phone call to their family members once a week for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, something. And so there was one man speaking, prisoner. And suddenly the time got over and the phone gets disconnected after 5 minutes. Right? And he's talking and something, poor guy, family, wife, children, I don't know whom he was talking to. Was very excited and talking. Suddenly, hello. Very upset, the phone was. And then the policeman said, let's go, next. So the other guy came and he had to phone up. So like that, you see, in the prison, these people, they want to have a good conversation with their family members and the beloved ones. And all of a sudden, that's the rule of the prison. Call gets disconnected and you have to keep the phone. So in the same way, in this material world, we have our plans, we have our beloved ones, and we want to have a good relationship. And all of a sudden, call gets disconnected. And then we say, hello, gone. You see? It's nice to laugh at a joke, but this is the fact for every one of us. It's a very serious matter. We don't want miseries in this world. We want to be with our beloved ones. But the nature of this material existence is like that. And what the Vedic literatures teach us is, there is an illusion in this world. We think that if I acquire a lot of money, if I have a lot of wealth, if I have a lot of power, if I have a lot of fame, if I have a big house, big family, all these things, then I can escape all these suffering. That's not true. Prabhupada often gave the example of John F. Kennedy. Prabhupada went to America in 1965, just 2 years before John F. Kennedy was killed. So, John F. Kennedy was waving to all his fans and supporters. And he was with his wife, young wife. He was a young man, very charismatic. And Americans, they just had great hope in him. And he also had great aspirations to do great things for his country. And he was waving to his fans. And suddenly, the bullets ran through his skull, and he fell into the arms of his wife in a pool of blood and died. You see, the telephone gets cut off not only to the simple prisoner, even to the President of America. When he is making his phone call to his supporters, suddenly call gets cut off. Time is over. This is material existence. This is karma granthi nibandhana. We are obligated to experience these tribulations of this world. Who wants that? Nobody wants these tribulations. Who wants to have this kind of a bitter experience in this world? But we are obligated because of karma. Karma granthi nibandhanam. And the Bhagavatam is now offering a method by which we can chindanti, we can sever the knots of karma granthi and get free. No more we are obligated to suffer in this world. That is possible when one is able to remember the Lord. Anudhyasina, anudhyana. And if such a facility is available, who is that person who is not ready to pay attention to the message of the Lord, to the activities of the Lord, to remember the Lord and His activities? This is the point, that it's a rhetorical question, which means saying that all of us should remember the Lord's activities, the Lord's pastimes, the Lord's message. We must pay attention to these things. Now, this suffering is there not only for poor people, for people in third world countries. No, this suffering is there whether you are first world, second world, third world, fifth world, doesn't matter. It's only an illusion that we think that if we become like first world country, then the sufferings will be mitigated. But that's not true. Everybody has to suffer in this world. It's an illusion that makes us think that I can escape the suffering by material enhancement. But the fact of the matter is, whatever position of material level you are in, you have to experience these tribulations. So, Bhagavatam is giving us a method by which one can overcome these tribulations. And this message has been analyzed, understood, and especially by the various acharyas has been elaborately explained. And finally, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the 6 Goswamis, a certain methodology of the practice of bhakti has been explained. So Prabhupada mentions here, the Goswamis of Vrindavan, who are authorized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to preach the bhakti cult, rigidly followed this rule and made immense literatures of transcendental science for our benefit. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of the different castes and orders of life in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. Now you see, it's very interesting to observe. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, came and demonstrated the principles that he taught in the Bhagavad Gita. And particularly, he spoke to his disciples, his Goswamis, and they wrote various literatures. It is described in the Vedic literatures. There are some Puranas, Brahmavaivarta Purana, Bhavishya Purana, which describe that this message of Krishna consciousness, this message of how one can be freed from these tribulations, this will be spread all over the world. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prophecy itself is there. Prithvi se ache yaso nagaradi gram sarvatra prachar hoibe morana. All over the Prithvi. Prithvi means the entire earth. Yaso nagaradi gram. As many towns and villages are there, as many cities and villages are there. Everywhere prachar hoibe morana. This message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be spread. But then if you see, the teachings of the Bhagavatam and the Vedic literature is obviously the teachings create a great deal of emphasis on Vairagya. Vairagya means to give up the material world, right? Normal, conventional understanding is to be detached from the material world, to not accept the various things of the material world, and to be away. I remember when we were in, earlier, before we came to this temple, we were in Sadashivnagar, 1980s, late 80s. One day, one donor of our temple, he told us that the Shankaracharya of so-and-so Mat, he's going to pass by here. I want you all to receive him. So they said, yeah, very good. It's a sannyasi of a very renowned Mat in our country. So naturally we should pay our respects. And we said, yes, we will be happy. And so a certain date was fixed and all that. And finally the sannyasi came. And of course he didn't come into the temple because he was in a rush or something. So we just stepped out of the temple and received him right in the street. He was a sannyasi, very austere sannyasi. And he either walks or the maximum he accepts is to ride a tricycle. There's a tricycle like we have in Vrindavan, that kind of a tricycle. He's sitting behind and there is one man cycling. And he's coming from Sringeri, like that in a bicycle. And there is one ambassador car in the front, traveling with him, carrying his other things, and probably some disciples also going in the car. So, very austere. This is how our generally Vedic culture is about austerity like that. You don't accept comforts, you deny, you reject material world, like that. And as a sannyasi, he is only supposed to walk. Okay, he has made a little concession to go in a tricycle. But otherwise he only walks. So this is Vedic culture. Right? When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he wanted to spread, he walked the entire South India. It took 18 months for him to travel to a few places in South India and go back to Puri. So that's how it was. And then there were devotees who would walk from Puri to Vrindavan. It would take 100 days. In the Sakshi Gopal story, it is said that the Brahmana walked for 100 days to Vrindavan. And when he brought back Krishna, Gopal also walked for 100 days from Vrindavan to Puri. It would take 100 days to go through the jungle and the river and the hill and the forest and all that. So now, imagine this knowledge has to spread all over the world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying 500 years back at that time, there was not even a train at that time. He himself was walking. The fastest mode of transport probably was a bullock cart or a horse cart, little faster than a bullock cart. That's it. How can this knowledge, how can this message go all over the world? And it is described that Vairagya is a very important facet of this knowledge also. Jnana, Vairagya, Yuktaya, we also read that in the previous verses. Jnana and Vairagya are very important aspects. Now you see, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made this prophecy, or rather he repeated the prophecy that already existed in the Vedic culture, Vedic scriptures. The Brahma Vaivarta Purana says that there will be 10,000 years of golden age of Kali Yuga, and at that time this message of bhakti will spread beyond the shores of the Bharatvarsha and go all over the world. Just see, it is predicted that it will go all over the world, but how will it go? If you have to travel by bullock cart from India to Europe through Afghanistan and Pakistan and Afghanistan and all that, and then go, how is it going to go all over the world? It's very, very unthinkable. That's why many of the Gaudiya Vaishnava followers, traditional followers, they said Prithvi means Prithvi Chate Yata Nagara Adi Gram Sarvatra Procha. They said Prithvi means entire West Bengal. Entire West Bengal it will be spread. Or maybe maximum they could stretch their imagination was all over India. It will be spread. But Prithvi means the whole world. Actually, Rupa Goswami, as per the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, establishes in the writings they wrote. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of different castes and orders of life in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. Rupa Goswami, as he was taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he taught what is called real Vairagya. And he wrote in the books, Bhakti Rasamrita. He says, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatardham Upayunjataha Nirbhande Krishna Sambhande Yuktam Vairagya Muchyate. Actually, these principles of Vairagya that Rupa Goswami has taught, actually, these are very important principles in our Siddhanta, which actually made this knowledge to go all over the world. Rupa Goswami is saying, Yukta Vairagya. Yukta means appropriate or due or correct Vairagya. What is that appropriate Vairagya? Rupa Goswami's definition is Anasaktasya Vishayan. Vishayan, objects of enjoyment. One should be Anasaktaha. Indriya Vishaya. One should be not attached to Indriya Vishaya. Anasaktasya Vishayan. However, these material, there are objects of material existence in this material world. Yata arham upayunjataha, but they should be used as much as appropriately it can be. Nirbhande Krishna Sambhande, in terms of Krishna Sambhanda, it can be used. Anasaktasya Vishayan Yata arham upayunjataha, in the service of the Lord, in relation to the Lord, Krishna Sambhanda, Yata arham upayunjataha, it can be engaged. Such renunciation is called Yukta Vairagya. And then he describes further, Rupa Goswami says, Prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastunaha mumukshuni parityago purgu vairagyam katyate. Mumukshu means those who are after liberation, who are interested in liberation and ending this material existence. They are called mumukshu. If they prapanchikataya buddhya prapanchikataya buddhya means buddhi or understanding, thinking that this is all prapanchika, this is all about this material existence. Prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastunaha. There are some vastu, there are things in the material world which have a harisambandha. But considering them to be prapanchikataya, material, prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastunaha mumukshvi parityago. They give up those things thinking this is all material. Prapanchikataya buddhya, with a material attitude. No, these are all material. And they parityago. Such vairagyam, phalgu vairagyam katyate. Phalgu vairagya. Phalgu means insignificant. Phalgu means false. It is not true vairagya. It is false vairagya. This is a very important principle. Prabhupada gives a nice example to appreciate this yukta vairagya. Suppose we see a 1,000 rupee note lying on the ground, right? We can look around, nobody is there. Slowly take that money and put it in the pocket, look around and go away. That's a very tempting thing to do, right? And especially there's a 1,000 rupee note and there's nobody around. So such a person is called a bhogi, who wants to enjoy. The second person comes, second alternative that is possible is, he comes and he sees there is a 1,000 rupee note, looks around, nobody is there, it's not mine, so I should not take that, and he walks away. He's a tyagi, vairagi, he didn't take it. 1,000 rupee note, he was tempted, but still he said, no, it's not mine, he walked away. This is good, vairagya. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says there's a third thing that is possible, even better than first one is of course not fair at all. The second one we may say at least we didn't take. No, but there is something even better than that. The third alternative is the man walks in and he sees a 1,000 rupee note lying on the ground. He looks around, nobody is there, but it's a valuable thing. It's very 1,000 rupee note. He picks it up, looks around, anybody lost the 1,000 rupee note? Fine. And then he says, oh, you lost your 1,000 rupee note? Here it is. Please take this, leaves the 1,000 rupee note with him and walks away. This is renunciation plus. It's not just renunciation. There is also enlightenment, there is also understanding, there is also knowledge that there is a valuable thing and that belongs to somebody, there is an owner for that and I should return it to the owner and I should not take it for myself. So there is renunciation plus enlightenment. This is called yukta vairagya. And the second example, leaving that away and going away, that is phalgu vairagya. It's vairagya. You cannot deny there is vairagya. But that's not, it's insignificant vairagya. Something more can be done with knowledge and enlightenment. So in the same way, Rupa Goswami teaches this important principle that anything in the material world, because everything in the material world has a Hari Sambandha, because Hari is the owner of everything. What is the Sambandha, Hari Sambandha with everything in this material world? He is the supreme proprietor. He is the supreme enjoyer. So everything can be used in the Lord's service. This is a very important principle of vairagya that Rupa Goswami, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches. And because of that, it is possible, and the Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas progressively use this method, use this principle, and said everything can be used in the service of the Lord to spread the message of the Lord. And you will see a very wonderful thing happening. I have some interesting data to share with all of you. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time was 1486, he was born. For 48 years, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifested his Leela, which is up to 1534. Right? 1486 to 1534 was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. And Rupa Goswami was 3 years younger than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Rupa Goswami was born in 1489, but he lived much longer than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, up to 1564. And Rupa Goswami, Chaitanya, they are the ones who brought these principles. Right? And already there is a prophecy that this message will go all over the world, but traditionally the Vedic culture is that there is sannyas and there is vairagya and all these things. You can't use all, maximum you can use is a tricycle. That's usually the understanding. Now Rupa Goswami has presented this new principle. And just see, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was preaching Krishna consciousness and spreading Krishna bhakti in India, simultaneously Columbus, his time was 1451 to 1506. He was discovering America. Around the time when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in India, he was actually discovering a way to come to India. He landed up with America. That's the story we know. So Columbus, this was happening in the Western world, right? Next, the year Rupa Goswami passed away, left this world, is 1564. Galileo was born in 1564. Because Galileo discovering the telescope and bringing new ideas, these were all revolutionary things happening in America. Right? That triggers, Galileo's discovery triggers the new age called the scientific age, according to modern historians. Galileo was from 1564 to 1642. The year in which Galileo died, 1642, Newton was born. Newton was from 1642 to 1727, because these are all very significant discoveries. Right? Newton, gravitational laws, Newton's laws of gravity, and all of these things. Mathematics. Around the year Newton passed away, or soon after Newton died, James Watt was born, who made the steam engine. Right? And it's because of steam engine, travel became possible. Very quick traveling. And actually James Watt, and around that time, Industrial Revolution began. Manufacturing things in big numbers and using technology. And government started making laws how to encourage capitalism. They started making policies. So 1750 to 1850 is considered Industrial Revolution. So much technology developed. And then in 1905, Wright brothers, for the first time, had a successful flying experience. And 1905 onwards, the aviation began. And then there was the First World War and the Second World War. And then there was another economic boost after the Second World War. And it is said, historians describe, from what happened from 1750 to 1950, around those 200 years, it's unprecedented growth in the history of the world. Because so many dynasties, so many empires had come and gone. Right? It was not a new thing. But nowhere this kind of a technology came up of that scale, and a kind of a global economy was gradually emerging. It took much later, it became global economy later, but it was moving in that direction. Unprecedented. For thousands of years, history existed. According to modern historians, we say for millions of years, but at least they say 2,000, 3,000 years. But there was no such thing happening. But all of a sudden, in this 200 years, all these started, 300, 400 years, such rapid progress happened. Not only technological progress was there. There was also social and political changes were happening. In the Western world, there was naturally this kind of we know that the white man's superiority existed, right? There were blacks in America, there were blacks in Europe, but they were not considered on par with, although there was a lot of movement and agitation going on. Even in America, blacks were not given the voting rights for the first time because the discrimination existed. Blacks and the white superiority and all those things. Now, so that kind of an equality for the first time was brought out all over America through President Johnson's Civil Rights Act. You'll be surprised to know when this act came into force in 1964, and the next year Srila Prabhupada was in America, where the political, social, economic circumstances were such that even though coming from an India, people were open to hear this new philosophy, new idea. And Srila Prabhupada used all of the technology that was available at that time for taking this knowledge of Krishna consciousness all over the world. It's almost like a conspiracy that's going on, isn't it? For thousands of years there was no technology, there was no economic world and economy and none of these kind of communication, none of these things existed. And then these few acharyas come and say, no, this knowledge is so valuable. People are suffering all over the world, tribulations of the world, karma granthi nibandhanam, chindanti, this knowledge, how this can break the knot of karma granthi has to be shared with the whole world. Whole world should be made, everybody should get this knowledge. And one day this will happen. And then suddenly things started changing. And in 300, 400 years, dramatic things happen. And then Srila Prabhupada comes and takes all of these, the benefits of all of these things, and takes this message all over the world and creates a worldwide organization. This is not a small thing. This is very extraordinary. Just like we saw some years back, one sannyasi of Madhva Math, one of the Udupi Maths, he crossed the ocean and went to a foreign country. They banned him. You can't worship Krishna anymore in the temple. This is the Vedic tradition is like that. But it is the principles that Rupa Goswami, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught, and Rupa Goswami and other Goswamis chalked out. These are very, very important principles. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in pursuance of that, he sent his sannyasi disciples to Europe. He sent 3 sannyasi disciples to Germany and London. He was breaking the principle. But they knew, no, Harisambandhi Vastunaha, Mumukshvi Parityago, Valgu Vairagya Katyate. No, this is not. For the sake of spreading the Lord's message, such voyages can be taken up even by sannyasis. It is not forbidden. They brought out these principles. And Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada took that even further. And this technology has been advancing more and more. And then there was one such technological genius who was also blessed with Hare Krishna Prasadam. And he brought out all these things. And today the technology is even more advanced, and knowledge and information is able to share this information so quickly. And all of this, the Goswamis have provided us a method how this knowledge can be used to spread, and it is still Vairagya. Provided Anasaktasya Vishaya. We should not use any of these things for our sense gratification, but we must use everything for the propagation of Krishna's message all over the world. So, this is what they have chalked out, the Goswamis have chalked out the method. And Prabhupada often said that these Goswamis would meet behind the Radha Damodar temple. That's where Prabhupada used to sit and write his Bhagavatam. These books were written there. Prabhupada was typing there, these books. And that is where, because Rupa Goswami's Bhajan Kutir was there, And all the Goswamis would sit there and they would all discuss and think how this knowledge can be spread all over the world one day. Our principles of Vedic culture is Vairagya. You do not walk. How will this knowledge go all over the world? No. There is the principle of Yukta Vairagya. Yes, and they wrote those principles. And those principles became the cornerstone of Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta, because of which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, could take this message all over the world. It's a very unusual thing that has happened. So, we are fortunate that we can participate in this glorious thing that's happening to spread the message of Krishna consciousness all over the world. We'll stop here. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Srila Prabhupada.